Quick announcement, crumb bums. YouTube has been cracking down with their community guidelines. And look, I don't want to lose my channel. So from now on, unfortunately, there's going to be censor bars on the art wherever necessary. And I'll be bleeping out words like and this way I can still make the episodes the way that I would like to make them. And you can purchase them uncensored through my Patreon or by getting in touch with me and, working something out. But if you're a cheapskate, don't worry, you can still watch them for free on YouTube. They're just censored is all. That's the end of the announcement. Enjoy the episode. You goddamn cheapskates. It's Canonically Crumb, the greatest show, a perfect show, that explores the comics and characters of the Crummy-verse. And a lot of people are saying this is the best verse, maybe in history. Trump. All right, settle down. We've got a new president. The old president. Well, I don't actually. I'm Canadian. And also this episode took a long time to get out, so he's not that new. And look, I'm sorry about that. But my American friends have a rerun president. And here I was thinking that I'd missed my chance to do an episode on President Donald after President Ice Cream Cone won in 2020. But Trump is back! Yay. And before we dive into this Trumpster fire of an episode, I just want to assure all of my Trump-loving viewers that while I'm not a conservative, and though I do believe that the Republican Party is a stinkin' cesspool of scum and pure unbridled evil, I'm no liberal fink either, and I also happen to believe that the Democrats are all pigs and weasels that represent a different kind of banal evil. Politically, I've got more of a pinko commie kind of thing going on. And in my eyes, the electoral politics of America are captured by two irredeemable right-wing parties that both serve the interests of landlords, cops, the military-industrial complex, and total global corporatocracy. You know the end of history? Well, it never really ended, and the most progressive president of the last 5 decades or so was probably Nixon. But
I am not a butt.
I recognize that my audience features a large contingency of baby boomer and Gen X men, and statistically, a lot of you guys like Trump, which I don't get personally, but you also like Crumb, and that I do get. And Crumb, for his part, has been very explicit in his feelings about Donald Trump. So what I'm going to try to do today is put aside my personal politics as much as I can. Try is the operative word there. And just focus on what Crumb has said about Trump and how he's depicted him in his comics. Because, spoiler alert, he doesn't like him very much. It's Canonically Crumb number 16. Our Crumb hates Donald Trump. As always, we need to acknowledge that, for our purposes, Robert Crumb's canon includes the Yum Yum Book, the Complete Crumb, the Weirdo Years, Zap, Hup, Mystic Funnies, and a bit of Dirty Laundry. Our first comic on this topic comes from the pages of Hup number 3 in 1989. But, considering the topic, it's probably worth giving some historical context as to where the American political culture was at the time and what Crumb's outlook was vis-a-vis that. Because even if you were there and you lived through the 1970s and 80s, well, it's been decades since then. And you know, I'm in the Facebook groups and I see the comments, and I think that a lot of Crumb bums take certain panels and certain positions Crumb holds, and the overall offensiveness of his comics, out of context, and viewing them through a culture war lens, think, hey, our Crumb, he's an anti-woke conservative like me. And let me just grab something. Alright, there we go. As something of an eco-utopian and a self-described anarcho-communist, and I quote, "Hell yes, I'm all for it. Communism. Yep, let's have it." I'm something of an anarcho-communist. Crumb's politics were already fairly radical from the start. But a protracted audit spanning the latter half of the 1970s left Crumb even more distrustful and paranoid than ever of the government, the media, and wealthy elites. He strongly believed that the IRS had targeted him in response to a comic he had published in Arcade the Comics Review in 1975, where Frosty the Snowman and a couple of teenage revolutionaries commit an act of domestic terrorism by bombing the stately Rockefeller Mansion, which we covered in episode number 10, Frosty the Snowman and His Friends. So check that out. This increased paranoia and distrust of authority coincided with the rise of Ronald Reagan, the so-called moral majority, and the expansion of Neoliberalism, the now hegemonic political philosophy that emphasizes privatization, deregulation, and the transferring of wealth from the public sphere to the rich in the form of that aforementioned privatization and deregulation, along with some huge tax cuts, which is expressed in this deleted scene from the 1995 documentary Crumb.
The government just ends up, transferring money from my pocket to theirs. Dirty, stinking bastards. That's what Republicans are all about, is they just lifted every restriction off of business. And the same thing happened in the 20s. They just looted the economy and wrecked it. In this county that I live in, there's like 6,500 homeless families. This is just like a rural county, 6,500 homeless families living under freeway exits.
More insidious, though, I think, is the moral philosophy of neoliberalism. Because if, like Margaret Thatcher says, there is no society, then there's no class beyond winners and losers.
We have losers.
And on an interpersonal level,
what am I doing here?
Relationships cease to be between friends contributing to a shared community.
We're not like friends exactly. It's like podcast co-hosts.
And become alliances of individual strivers based on market gains.
Like maybe business partners is more like it.
It's a heuristic applied to all aspects of art, life, and culture, reducing authentic creative expression to mere novelty and spectacle, and robbing us of any true connection to our environment and society. And I think this worldview, and how it affected Crumb at the time, is summed up conveniently in a single story from Need More Love, the graphic memoir of Aileen Kaminsky Crumb.
Little by little, our world had been transformed by the wealthy rednecks who had built giant McMansions on the hilltops all around us. Each pretentious castle had a different style. There was the Ponderosa Ranch, the Swiss Chalet, the fake stone medieval fort, the Mediterranean hacienda, Adam's Family Victorian, and the postmodern police station look, complete with a yard laid out like a helicopter pad. The ugliness and the noisy, dust-producing vehicles that these new neighbors drove made us increasingly cranky.
Meanwhile,
a growing reactionary Christian fundamentalist movement, known as the moral majority, galvanized by the expansion of rights for women, gays, and black people throughout the 1960s and 70s, was currying favor with the Reagan administration and gaining nationwide influence with its many panics over the supposed moral decay of America. In that same passage, Aileen continues.
Even in the late 1980s, the rising tide of Christian fundamentalism was evident. Both Robert and I had volunteered to give art classes for free since there was no money in the California school budget for music, art, and other cultural activities thanks to Governor Ronald Reagan, who had slashed school funding by severely lowering property taxes. I noticed that about half the kids were absent when I arrived. The minister of the new Foursquare Church had told his congregation that I was an agent of the devil. Then one day I went for some coffee with a friend who was a teacher. When she returned to school, one of her colleagues asked her what she was doing having coffee with the wife of the child pornographer. At that point, I started seeing images of lynch mobs and burning crosses, and I knew we had to get our daughter out of there.
And Aileen wasn't alone in this fear. On a sketchbook page from the time titled, "Are the Mean Men Marching Yet?" Paranoid Fantasy That Won't Go Away, number 9608-B, Crumb depicts himself being arrested and getting his teeth kicked in by a militia of jackbooted thugs that call him a goddamn pornographer and a purveyor of filth. Also frequently appearing in the sketchbooks from this period was the return of the rough, tough Creampuff, and Crumb would merge that character and his paranoid fantasy in Hup number 1 from 1987 in the Rough Tough Creampuffs Take Charge, where the Rough Tough Creampuffs, a gang of alienated hypermasculine reactionary thugs, overthrow the government in a violent coup and proceed to burn the goddamn thing down on day one, leaving the liberal technocratic wimps to step in and clean up the mess. And we looked at that comic way back in Canonically Crumb number 3, the Rough Tough Creampuff, so check that out too. But notably for our subject today, one of the Creampuffs, Doug, his day job was as a board member of 6 banks and as CEO on 3 major corporate boards. So we can see that all of this, the neoliberalism, the real estate chicanery, and the fear of an emergent reactionary evangelical movement was interwoven and all contributed to Crumb just taking his ball and going home. To his new home, in the south of France, that is. Or, as he put it in a 1989 Playboy TV interview,
I just hope to get somebody more liberal in there next time. I don't know. If we get any of those fundamentalist guys or anything, like they get in power, we're really sunk. We're really in for trouble. I might leave the country if that happens. Just say, okay, America, screw you. I'll go somewhere else. I don't care.
and I'll leave it to you, dear Crumbums, to connect all of those threads to Trump and recent historical trends. But that was the political landscape in the late 1980s, when Crumb read The Art of the Deal, Trump's best-selling memoir and business advice book from 1987, ghostwritten by Tony Schwartz. Crumb found the whole book so damn offensive, he decided that the time had come to shake his fist, or at least a single digit, at the injustices of the system, to vent his rage at the rich and powerful who force us all to live in this polluted concrete jungle, with a serious political protest feature he called Point the Finger, from Hup number 3 in 1989. Sitting at a desk in front of a New York skyline, Crumb prepares to address the Hup readers directly. He says, "In this issue of Hup, we're going to point that merciless finger at one of the more visible of the big-time predators who feed on this society. This crass and venal character is so arrogant, he seeks out the spotlight and publicly boasts of his disgusting exploits. He didn't ask to make an appearance in Hup, but we've brought him here anyway as a special surprise for you, ladies and gentlemen. One of the most evil men alive, real estate tycoon, Donald Trump." This introduction tells us, in broad strokes, pretty much everything we need to know about Crumb's opinion of Donald Trump. Crumb has always been extremely antagonistic towards property development, commercialization, and big corporations in general. But he singles out real estate tycoon Donald Trump as amongst the most evil men alive. And I think it's his visibility that's really the sticking point here. You know, it's one thing to be a big-time predator and chew the flesh off the bones of society. But the fact that he'd publicly brag about it for clout, well, that's next-level shit. You know, he's got no shame. Just greed, narcissism, and violent sociopathy. And this is a good example of that insidious neoliberal morality I mentioned earlier. Because in any rightly ordered society, or even a slightly ordered one for that matter, anyone would look at such a corrupt, money-grubbing mercenary jerk and the immiseration that they spread, and intuitively understand them to be a villainous wretch and a sicko. Furthermore, for obvious reasons, someone like that wouldn't want to draw undue attention to themselves and their immoral business practices. But Under a market-based morality system, Trump's success is meritocratic proof that he exhibits great aptitude and a strong Protestant work ethic. You know, since cold, unbiased market efficiency guarantees only the most deserving such positions of wealth and power. Therefore, why wouldn't he brag about it? He's been blessed. And if you believe that, hey, I've got a bridge to sell you. If you could just be so kind as to leap off of it first. Back to the comic. Angry and indignant, Donald Trump is dragged in. Crumb greets his unwilling guest, but immediately grimaces in disgust, exclaiming, "You're so hateful I can't even look at you." Trump, confused, wonders if it's all an elaborate joke, perhaps a rib by one of his friends. Crumb explains that the two very tough ladies, Tracy and Marnie, who brought the Donald in by force, infiltrated Trump's organization at Crumb's behest. Part of an elaborate plan to get that slime ball on his show, rcrumb's point the finger. A situation Trump is decidedly not pleased with. The next 3 pages are very dense with dialogue, so I'm going to aim for some uncharacteristic brevity here. Crumb points the finger at Trump and lists off his various crimes against humanity, the least of which is making the world an uglier place, while much worse are the countless lives that have been destroyed by Trump eviction notices, as well as his audacity to revel publicly in his despicable rent-seeking. Tracy and Marnie intimidate Trump, suggesting appropriate punishments, such as him in the ass with the very same way he the people of New York City. Like a caged animal, Trump violently lunges at Crumb, and the girls can barely hold him back. He threatens to end Crumb's rinky-dink little career, and starts in on charming the girls to his side, which at first they're not receptive to. Now it's Trump's turn to point the finger, an unscheduled segment of the show. He accuses Crumb of being full of hate, and poisoned by jealousy for anyone successful and attractive to women, which is a half-truth. He admits to being a hustler, but says what Crumb really can't stand is that Trump is happy and enjoying life. Had Crumb come to his office and talked to him, Trump could have been a boon to his career, as identifying creative people and helping them excel is a talent he claims to possess in spades. He goes on to name the one unforgivable sin Crumb has committed: wasting Trump's time. At this point, Tracy and Marnie have been completely seduced by Donald's awesome charisma and boyish charm. He invites them to the winning team as, after all, it's only human nature to want to go with the winners. And given Robert's proto-incel beliefs about women being attracted to strutting, self-confident, ruthlessly unscrupulous and powerful sons of bitches, this is kind of an appropriate turn for the comic, which he acknowledges later on. Trump elaborates for the next 5 panels about all of the decadent and hedonistic pleasures the girls will enjoy at the party he and Ivanka, his then wife, are throwing that evening at his fabulous club Mar-a-Lago, which, in 1989, still had to be explained to readers in a footnote. The wonders of Mar-a-Lago include a humongous banquet honoring esteemed business leaders, 5 bands and celebrity guests including movie stars, famous athletes, and senators, also a tribal chieftain from Botswana carving exotic meats in time to the rhythm of specially imported African drummers, incredible acrobats from Romania, and exotic dancers from God knows where. And you win prizes! A free manicure before dining, and a unique and valuable gift hidden in the dessert, which is followed by a stage play where Trump will be playing himself in a dramatization of his struggle to get Television City moving forward, culminating in the unveiling of an 800 square foot architectural model of the latest revised design for the complex. Television City, later referred to as Trump City, was a proposed and unrealized, sprawling development project in Manhattan's Upper West Side, the crown jewel of which would have been an 152-story residential tower, the tallest building in the world at the time. After the banquet, Trump, Ivana, and a few intimate friends will be retiring for a late-night bacchanal on his yacht, where Trump will personally introduce Tracy and Marnie, who will be decked out in brand-spanking new and expensive party dresses courtesy of the Donald, to some extremely well-heeled, eligible young gentlemen. Crumb compares Trump to Trimalchio, which in 1989 still had to be explained to readers in a footnote. Shout out to all my fellow Petronius heads out there. But for the rest of you crumbums who aren't up on your ancient Roman literature, Trimalchio is a character from the Satyricon, written by Petronius in the 1st century AD. Gaius Pompeius Trimalchio Maecenateanus, the outrageous nouveau riche former slave, whose ostentatious and frankly grotesque dinner party is described in detail over several chapters. Crumb even dresses Trump in the costume and regalia of a wealthy Roman citizen, complete with laurels and toga, lamenting, "It's just like the Roman Empire. Nothing's changed in 2,000 years." I think the comparison of Trump to Trimalchio, Trump-Malchio as it were, is funny, even if Trump dismisses Crumb's analogy, snarling, "You're a highly literate SOB, aren't ya?" But I think the rags to riches stereotype plays a bit into Trump's branding. You know, he loves to mythologize himself as being self-made and his wealth being hard-earned, contrary to the reality that he was the beneficiary of an extremely wealthy slumlord father who Woody Guthrie wrote a song about. But he is boorish and crass, what with his golden toilet and lavish hamburger parties, so the nouveau riche trope holds in that respect. Tracy and Marnie go off laughing with Trump, leaving the bitter cartoonist alone, staring down the barrels of two of New York's finest bastards. And at the bottom of the frame is a scroll with a 2,500-year-old quote from Lao Tzu. "Nature's way is to take away from those that have too much, and give to those that have too little. Man's way, on the contrary, is to take away from those that have too little, to give more to those who already have too much." And that's how it ends. Or does it? Enter Mr. Hupp himself, Stan the Man Schneider. Stan Schneider, described in his first appearance as that decadent but charismatic expert in the marketing of graphic story magazines to America's youth, is generally believed to be a send-up of both Stan Lee and Jim Shooter, publisher and editor-in-chief respectively, of mainstream comics juggernaut Marvel Comics. And look, I don't know much about those kinds of comics, but given the moves into the direct market that Marvel was making under Shooter in the 1980s, when this Hupp was published, I think it's probably true. Schneider is decidedly not based on former President Bill Clinton, despite the inevitable comments you see whenever the cover of Hupp #1 is posted online. For me, I think the Lee Shooter reference is kind of irrelevant to the character, as he just looks like any other sleazebag businessman out of Crumb's sketchbooks at the time. But Schneider is more of a stereotypical Hollywood agent type, and sometimes a croonin' Goomba a la Sinatra or Tony Bennett. And he's essentially the personification of Crumb's struggles with the non-creative business end of the comics industry. Stan Schneider appears at the beginning of all 4 issues of Hupp, as well as Mystic Funnies #3. He speaks directly to the audience, promoting the brand and addressing controversy. Often he's paired with Robert, hassling him about publishing schedules and his time-consuming cross-hatching technique, and ugly sex fantasies that hurt sales and turn off readers. But although Stan Schneider exhibits a lot of the same crass, mercenary, capitalist aspects of culture that Trump does, And though Robert often depicts the relationship between himself and Stan as hostile to say the least, ultimately Stan Schneider is on Crumb's side, and the reader's side for that matter, and therefore he's a force for good within the comics, which is why he appears in Point the Finger now. Standing in front of a Johnny Carson-style curtain, a recurring background for Stan, he says, hold it," and calls Crumb backstage. Stan the Man praises Crumb's takedown of Trump, but he says the readers need Donald to get his comeuppance at the end. Robert suggests that the Lao Tzu quote was a bit of irony, and perhaps that's good enough. But Schneider pushes the issue, saying that he disagrees with the venerable Chinese philosopher, arguing that nature is actually dog eat dog. Crumb is steadfast in that he won't change it, but Stan convinces him to tack a new ending on, which he does. Literally. So we return to the third last panel, which is shown from a different angle, only this time, Tracy and Marnie find Dawn frightfully boring. Also, the girls really look like they're based on real people in this panel. I scoured my collection looking for any specific women that might have been the models, but I didn't find any references to a likely Tracy or Marnie. However, he very well could have based them on real women, but used fake names. Now I have too many potential candidates for Freckles here, so I'm not going to name names. But I think small head, big body here is possibly inspired by Diane Hansen, a friend and lover of Robert's, who he drew a portrait of in Art and Beauty #1 about 6 years later, with the same quirky facial expression seen in the panel we're looking at. And we can see from this earlier sketch of the same photo, albeit drawn after Point the Finger, he includes the words, small head, big body, that's how we like 'em, with an arrow pointing to the amazing Diana Hansen. Diane is a former editor of pornographic fetish magazines, Jugs and Leg Show, who appeared in the documentary Crumb. You may remember her as the one who said,
Robert does not exaggerate anything. He is endowed with one of the biggest penises in the world.
Which, for the record, Aileen disagreed with, claiming in no uncertain terms that she had encountered larger. Diane is now the editor at Taschen Books, an art book publisher that handles a lot of Crumb's work, including the rcrumb sketchbook series. Anyway, Freckles, I don't know which one is Tracy and which is Marnie, says, think it's time now, Rob. And Crumb, the harsh taskmaster, agrees, saying, take him away, which they do, calling him a big baby and telling him to hush as he screams and begs for his life. Crumb says, let this be a lesson and a warning to all the would-be Trumps out there. And with an upsy-daisy, the girls give Donald Trump a swirly, dunking his head in the toilet and flushing. But even after our last episode about Charles and Robert Crumb's high school bully, Skutch, the bully's end, I really can't muster any sympathy for Donald Trump getting bullied this way. As Crumb puts it, if anybody deserves a swirly, it's America's hottest young billionaire. And this line is in reference to the blurb on the back of the Art of the Deal, which indicates that Crumb had read the 1989 Warner Books edition. Nervously, Robert speaks to the reader, saying, and isn't this a nutty kind of country where you can draw any irreverent, degrading thing you want about the most powerful people and nobody cares? You don't get jailed. You're not persecuted. They just ice you out of the marketplace. Ta-ha-ha. And I suppose that is better than King Louis Philippe having Daumier imprisoned for caricaturing him as a pear. God bless the US fucking A, I guess. So, washed up psycho Donald Trump slinks away, sobbing like a wet, I don't know, fart. While Crumb points the finger one last time, shouting, okay, Don, that's it, get the hell out of here, and keep your nose clean. Next time you might not get off so easy. As Tracy and Marnie carry Robert away on their shoulders, they say, it's not power and wealth that we crave, it's artists that we like. Which, you know, has certainly worked well for me over the years. And it works for Crumb as the comic devolves into the inevitable weird sex fantasies that we've all come to love and expect. Only I'm not going to dwell on it today because it's just not super interesting in relation to our topic. Except that I will point out that one of the girls has a Goodyear sticker on her ass. Cut to backstage where Stan Schneider voices his approval for the new ending. Crumb concurs but points out that the first ending was more realistic. And it ends with the narration box that reads, "The end already!" So there you have it. rcrumb draws Donald Trump in 1989. But wait! There's more! Because 3 decades later in the year 2020, Crumb would be trumping it up on the old Trump train once again. But we're going to cover that in Canonically Crumb number 17, Donald Trump Part 2, Jared Kushner's Revenge. That's right, it's a two-parter, Crumb Bums. And this is the end of Part 1. If you like this program, please remember to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. I've been your host, Kyle Bridget. You can find my links in the show description, and you can help support my work and the programs on this channel by signing up on Patreon, where you'll get access to all of my uncensored videos, or you can even just buy them there directly if you're not the joining type. But if you are, you'll also be thanked at the end of the program, which is now. Canonically Crumb will be back as weekly as possible with another deep dive into the Crummy-verse. Thanks again, Crumb Bums, and keep on trumping? That can't be right.
I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. My father is rich in houses and lands, and I am his heir. I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. I'm a happy, happy, happy millionaire. I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. My father is rich in houses and lands, and I am his heir. I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire.